Hello and welcome to the Transfer Flow podcast. And on today's show, Liverpool get the win against Chelsea, but is the defence shakier than we thought? Then Arsenal lose their first game of the season to Bournemouth, but how is VAR's starring role affecting things this season? And then Fulham, what have they been feeding Raul Jimenez? That's all on today's episode. So we're back for another Monday edition of the Transfer Flow podcast. And when I say we're back, I mean me, Patrick Van Straten, and of course, Ted Knutson. Good to see you, Ted.
Hello. We mixed it up last week. We switched our recording days, and so I'm back on my Monday slot. Partly because, oh my God, it's the Champions League and Championship week, and like there's so much analysis that has to be done. I'm like, whoa! But no, it's good to be back. The roundup is done. Now we can jibber jabber about the stories of the weekend.
Yeah, and I think that we're going to kind of do it in reverse order today. It felt like you were bringing up some maybe unseen stories from the Premier League in the roundup. And so we've gone in reverse order here, or maybe the most obvious order. To start, Liverpool versus Chelsea, biggest game of the weekend, 2-1 win for Liverpool. Bosh, bosh, bosh. Seems quite straightforward. The actual match was pure chaos.
So this is one of my favorite parts about the current Premier League. The attackers right now are so good, then it is difficult for anybody to keep a full handle on a game, especially at the top level, because it's not just like one threat that you have to worry about. It's like 3 threats and sometimes 4 threats that you've got to keep control of. And there are no defenses this year that are capable of doing that across the whole of a 90 minutes. This match felt like no one had control the entire time, which creates amazing tension, both for fans and also it's at Anfield. So like the tension's always really good there anyway. I thought that it was an outstanding match, not least because I was happy to win half of both of my bets on the under and on Liverpool minus 0.75. But also just it was a really good display for I think what the league kind of is right now, with certain exceptions.
Yeah, it was interesting that both of these teams, who we've seen press pretty high, pretty aggressively this season, went into this game perhaps knowing that if they did that, they would be a bit easy to play through. So there were lots of points in the first half where you saw a centre-back just stop, put his foot on the ball, hope that someone would come and press him and open something up. I think it ended with Liverpool at something like 12 PPDA and Chelsea at 15. There was a point in this game. Okay, so I think you said this, where Chelsea were really getting hold of things. Liverpool's defence was very, very narrow. Chelsea were able to create chances out wide or get the ball out wide very quickly. And I kind of wondered, like, why are Liverpool not pressing more aggressively, given that this Chelsea defence, they may want to play out from the back, but I don't know if they actually can do that to beat Liverpool at Anfield levels yet.
I think that they were concerned. Like there's a level of danger that says that if you, and actually I think Schlott flagged it up in his post-match press conference. Like, I think that we can put Salah as a fullback because like he had to do so much work in order to help out Trent. And Trent is a double-edged sword, right? Like when you're pushing Trent forward and making him a big part of the attack, you know that his defensive abilities are, slightly above average. Like he's not the worst fullback in the world, like defensively, but if he's pushed into the attack and he's forced to like carry on some of that creative role and to be able to push inside in order to do those large, those swings across the pitch, like the danger is coming the other way, the space in behind. And the danger for Chelsea is that like they have 4 great attackers like up front. Sancho is sort of the same sort of problem though. Like he's not doing a lot of defensive work most of the time. And actually that's one of the reasons why I think they subbed him off, because they were trying to crack things open. They had a pretty good run of play in first 25 minutes, but then he seemed to disappear mostly and become a bit of a liability. Madueke, I don't think had that problem. Like Jackson continued to work really hard, got a payoff and nearly multiple payoffs in this game. So this is really like, this is as cautious as they can be in the modern style of the Premier League. The old caution stuff, like think of Jose versus Benitez, just like absolute mid-block mud. Nobody can do anything. The ball never stays on the deck. Everyone's getting kicked. That's the old style. This is the new style where the attackers are so good, everybody's a little bit afraid. You know that you've got elite defenders. You're actually worried about your own attackers needing to do work on the other side. But you're hoping to get those counter punches whenever you can. And it makes for a tense product. It makes for a very physical product. It makes for some really good big matches that you're not worried about being 0-0s like we used to. Like now you're like, it could be 2-2 on a regular basis, and kind of has been.
Mm-hmm. And I just thought the game was really, in the first half, one defender having a panic attack after another. I mean, Robertson had a horrible time in the first half against Madueke. Madueke was just pushing the ball and going past him, which is quite a sight to see.
I worry about Rabo right now. He feels a little cooked, like against the best guys. I don't know if he's got an injury or a knock, or if this is sort of the end of career cycle. But we are noticing him more in his stand out in ways that he didn't before.
Yeah, and it makes you think. Liverpool next week, they might be lucky if they come up against an Arsenal without Saka. But if Saka's back for that game, then you would certainly look at this match and think, that's an interesting opportunity. As is the fact that, as I said, Liverpool's defence stayed very, very narrow, and the ball out to Sancho or Madueke was very easy for Chelsea to find. That obviously seemed like a calculation that Slot was willing to make. I'm not sure whether he'd be willing to make that against other sides, but if you're not going to do it, if you're going to allow that against Chelsea, I don't know why you... Chelsea are very dangerous. I don't know.
I think that they felt they needed to double Nico a lot. And because of that, without committing, more defensive responsibility there. And to actually give Schlott credit, like there's always a risk reward in your tactical choices.
Sure.
Like the reward is getting Curtis Jones and being an absolute menace inside and around the box, even when Salah's out wide, right? Like Jones was a problem the entire game. And you could see that every time that he was in space inside the box, because they had to overcommit to Salah, like they didn't know what to do. And basically he was sort of the piece that tore them apart. But the way that happens is by being a little risky in the middle, giving up width on the sides. And if they didn't do that, if they committed more to the midfield and defending and helping the center, then that's another response that they wouldn't be able to do. And he wouldn't be pushed as far forward to be able to take advantage of that.
Yeah, I mean, Jones, I think for a while has been, when fit, one of the most underrated players in the Premier League. He's fantastic on the ball. In this game was really gliding through midfield and obviously made that amazing off-ball run. Probably should have been tracked, but made a great off-ball run to score the winning goal. What I was thinking, though, watching this in the first half, was I thought, God, we've been really nice about Liverpool's defence so far this season. And we may have been slightly too nice, I thought, just watching that first half, because it did seem... I thought Trent was pretty lucky to get away with not, getting a pen given against him for the Sancho leg tangle.
Yeah, I didn't feel there was that much in that one. That felt like mostly fair. Let's call it like... Yeah, this is the theme of the whole weekend, though, was that there were red cards, there were penalties, and there was VAR. and usually we avoid it, but like it made itself the main character of the weekend, and it did it again in the biggest game of the weekend as well. So first of all, there was the pen call of the upending of Jones by Sanchez that I felt could have gone either way, but went back to the monitor, and the ref was like, okay, we're going to overrule that because Sanchez got enough of the ball or whatever, even though he completely took out the man. Didn't matter. And then the other one it got right, absolutely right, was Nico was onside for his goal. Great through ball. I didn't realize Caicedo was going to be like a string puller, but it feels like he's doing that now. And like, that's a gift. Like if you've got like, a Conte-esque type player that also pulls a lot of strings from the back and out wide, pretty impressive. Also another reason why Liverpool might've been worried about, Jackson through the middle. Like he's able to spin off, and if they had time to be able to make those passes. But in this game in particular, I felt like the VAR calls were mostly right. It kept the things tight. It kept it tense. If Liverpool go up 2-0 there at that point, like, they feel like they can probably just punch on the break all the time. That wasn't what really happened. And I thought that, I thought they got it pretty well right. We have another game where you might think that they got it less right, but I don't know.
Well, I mean, there are pretty much you could pick any game from this weekend and say that. But I guess, look, this match ultimately, Liverpool better side. XG basically reflects the score. Yeah, there are question marks, but Chelsea are going to be a problem for a lot of teams this season. And it doesn't really change too much there, except, of course, that one team in the title race dropped some points this weekend.
Hang on. Before we transition, I do want to say that this is the first time we saw Liverpool face a real team. It was at home. They are just vulnerable enough for concern, right? Like you could see them on different days, like dropping points or potentially the scoreline even being reversed in certain situations. Like it was tight. They were at home. There will be teams that drop points this year, and I don't think that we're going to see anybody close to 90 this go around. I could be wrong about that, but I think that there is enough real strength in the middle of the table that teams are gonna have some roller coasters, and whoever wins the title is gonna win it via a marathon and probably not at a sprint at the end.
So that's good news for Arsenal fans, maybe after their start to the season. Yeah,
you mean Red Card FC?
Yeah, we are Red Card FC, aren't we? I think it was you pointed this out in your roundup that Arsenal may potentially be the best of these three title challengers, but because of the way the season's gone for them so far, makes it very, very interesting.
Can't really tell because they seem to play, every other match is about 45 minutes without their 11th person on the pitch.
Yeah, and this was the longest one of all so far, right? This was 30 minutes. Saliba goes off. When Saliba went off, it was basically 0-0 on XG. Nothing had happened in this game.
Very cagey start. You could tell that Arteta set the squad up for that. They were not interested in being dynamic. They were gonna lock things down at least for the first half of it. I think that's probably pretty good respect paid for Bournemouth, but not unworthy of them given how they've played against some bigger sides like Chelsea as well. So yeah, nothing doing in the first 30 minutes, and then
yeah, really, really ugly pass under pressure from Trossard, and Saliba has a little panic. Or maybe he just thinks he's going to get away with it where he is on the pitch. He's a long way out. And, you look at Saliba and you look at Ben White, who I wouldn't say is covering, but is hoping to cover. It gets given as yellow. It goes to review. It gets given as a red. And to be honest, after that, Bournemouth did a better job creating against 10-man Arsenal than City did or Spurs did.
Good set piece goal from them as well. I mean, I didn't necessarily agree with the design of the play, but when they, it's a tough one to score, but it was a really nice goal. I think actually because Arsenal get caught in possession there, and the pass from Trossard is part of the problem. The center backs are particularly wide.
Yeah.
If they're less wide, which they need to be wide for in possession play, like that probably is only a yellow because White is fairly clearly covering at that point. But because they're quite wide, you're like, the ref actually has to make a judgment on that. He gets to rewatch it in slow motion it wasn't unfair. Like the VAR seemed a little weird, but here's the thing, like football is all about marginal calls. Like it's marginal calls all across the board, and it happens so fast. If you don't think football happens at an amazing pace, go sit down near the pitch and try and watch multiple things at once, which is kind of what the ref has to do, right? They have to watch the ball, but then they have to hear the collisions. They have to see this. They have to see that. They have a little bit of help. They've got, people that are also commenting on the sides. They've got the video official potentially in their ear. They've got a fourth official. But it's all really, really fast. And to process that perfectly all the time, super challenging. I've always been of the opinion, actually, I'm not always, but for a long time, that there should be a second ref. You get another set of angles. So many other sports do multiple refs. This is the biggest of the fields that people play on. And you've only got one in the center that's calling everything. So yeah, anyway, that happens and it opens up the game. Bournemouth were good. I don't think that there's a ton to say about it other than Arsenal found it tough to defend again with 10 men. They've done it pretty well previously. And finally, Bournemouth were able to take advantage of that.
It was interesting, though, that Arsenal continued to press really aggressively, though, after the red card. They still pressed super, super hard, much harder than Bournemouth did, kind of understandably, because Bournemouth had the ball. But it's interesting that they decided to do this, whereas obviously against City and even against Spurs, where they weren't down, one of the rare games this season when they weren't down to 10 men, they chose to play much more conservatively. It seems like quite a strange decision. It's almost as if Arteta felt, well, we can't afford to drop points in this game now.
I would not have made that choice. They spanked them 3-0 and 4-0 last year, so it might have been based off of what happened last season and success that they had previously had. One of the things we're kind of seeing happen across the league is like sometimes these coaches, the slate's not wiped clean from season to season. Like they remember what they did against this team last year, right? And they look back at their notes potentially from the game plan that succeeded against them last year.
Mm-hmm.
You can't always do that against the last coach or the coach that you face. Like, if you face them more times, they will realize and fix their adjustments. But also these teams we feel most of the teams in the Premier League got somewhat better. Some got significantly better this year. And so the same game plan that you might have used last season or 2 seasons past may not have anywhere near the same level of execution as it has before, even if in the coach's head, this is what occurred before. So sometimes you kind of have to like really, junk it up and be like, all right, we need to shift things. We need to do some stuff that's unexpected. Sir Alex was like legendary for doing this. Like he'd come out and do weird shit for the first 25 and you'd be like, who even predicted this? No one did. And part of it is just like throw everybody off. Like, hey, you have no idea what's going to happen. So we're going to throw all of your plans out the door. And then we're going to see how you adjust and how good your team is. I think sometimes they get caught in this focus of we're just going to do what succeeds because, hey, it's, Spurs, right? But it's only Spurs. I don't know. They dump points, but I think a lot of teams will dump points. I do not think that there's a great team this year, especially with City. I think City have looked more and more fragile over time. They've given up 9 goals already in 8 games, which feels like almost criminal for them. They have only dropped. They haven't lost yet, but they definitely can be gotten at.
Yeah, I mean, you can have a bad run and you can concede goals, but when you watch City, it's just runs up the gut. Chances given up to kind of crappy teams. It does feel like that we're in this kind of transitional zone, and we might be for the next couple of years. I mean, maybe Arsenal
zone runs up the gut. Well done, sir. Look at that professionalism right there.
Oh my god! Immediately ruined. Okay. Well, I did actually want to ask you. I mean, Arsenal have not dropped points 11 versus 11 this season, which is pretty funny, and yet have dropped a bunch of points. And now they'll be without Saliba. They'll be without.
There's nothing happening for the next game, is there? No big deal.
Nothing will happen there. That should be fine. One thing I did want to ask you about. This will be familiar territory to people who've followed stats for a long time, but it might be newer to other people. How do you counsel clubs? Did StatsBomb ever counsel clubs on letting the opposition score versus taking a red card? Because I know there have been studies on this over the years. And here, 30 minutes in, with Arsenal, you'd say better to let him run away if he's going to run away and get the chance. At what point does the calculus change? At what point is it better to take the red, do you think?
It's so hard to adjust the player mentality on this. Like, maybe you can. So a red card's worth about 0.8. It's almost worth a penalty, effectively, across 90 minutes. So one player up is worth 0.8 of a goal. So almost a full goal across 90 minutes. So you're at the 30-minute mark. The red card should only be worth, say, like, 0.525 or something like that. It's hard to say. Like, maybe it's 0.55. I don't know. The players hate it, and they would hate. They hate the idea of it, like, because somebody never tell them to switch off, right? Or never tell them not to do something. They always want to play 11 as well, especially teams that like to press. And so I think there are significant structural problems around it. Like if you're playing low block, maybe you've got more redundancy and more resilience. If you're playing fairly high press in a possession game, I bet that has a bigger impact on it. But the thing is, there's such a small sample size to be able to do the analysis around this that you're going to come out with really big guidelines that may or may not be true in a particular situation.
Okay. Well, let's move on to another installment then of VAR ruins football. That's what Ted says privately on Slack. Saints, Leicester. Saints lose at home to Leicester. Sorry, I don't mean to laugh. It's just funny. It's just funny. By the way, thank you to whoever on the Transfer Flow Twitter account decided to re-up my Premier League predictions. When was this? Was it? I can't remember where it was, but I think it might have been halftime Chelsea Liverpool or something, and I thought I hate this. But my Arsenal number one and my Saints could maybe stay up over Leicester predictions. Certainly the Saints one is over.
It looked really good at halftime. It looked like it was locked in. You're like, oh, they're clicking. Those goals were magnificent. Like the young guys are scoring. They're really close to the box. Like everything that's happening in that game felt like it was on top of the goalkeeper, which is not a place for things to happen. Really, that's not a good spot for either of those teams. But yeah, it looked awesome in the first half.
Yeah, and then it turned out there was another half of football that Southampton had to play, and they didn't enjoy it. I think that's fair to say. Gave up a 2-0 lead. Boy, and ended up giving up 2.8 expected goals at home to Leicester, which I don't really like. I tell you who else doesn't like it. Russell Martin. Russell Martin, I don't think wants to go to Southampton games anymore.
Russell, did you know that 2-0 is the most dangerous lead? Yeah, absolutely. We've heard
this season. It actually has been pretty fucking dangerous.
Might be, yeah. Weird amount of. I mean, there is more variance. Again, teams being better at attacking and teams deciding to try and sit on leads means that maybe two goals can be a little more dangerous. You'll see more volatility because of that. Like teams that are willing to just keep going at it, like they will just end up scoring more goals. It's actually it's a thing in the championship right now. There are a couple of head coaches down there that are coaching their teams, even at 1-0 up, like stay from like 60, 65 minutes on. Like, let's not take any real chances, boys. Let's just defend. And even like two of the best teams in the league down there, and you can read it in the gambling analysis stuff, like they're trying to sit on leads. And West Brom had 3 shots, I think, in the last 30 minutes against, what is a pretty overmanned Oxford team. Lost 2 points off of that, right? Like if they continue to attack, especially as these teams get tired, like your better players should be able to take better advantage of that. But if you try and sit on leads, like you'll burn points in the same way that being too defensive with a red card will often cause you to burn points. Being too pressy with a red card will also cause you to do that because guys get tired. But there is a way that coaches start to talk when it's clear that they want to be fired. And they start saying things in press conferences and they start blaming players directly. Now, most of the time, the very best head coaches will cover those guys with their bodies. They are a meat shield for any specific criticism to players. The reason why is because players have a really tough time. Just look at their social media at any time. Like somebody's bet goes wrong, the social media goes terrible. Like they make a mistake, the social media goes. There's no reason for it. Fans are insane. Like it's not okay. So the coach is out there to protect those guys and say, yeah, we didn't execute as well as we could have, right? They do a lot of things that from a verbiage point of view in the media gives players cover and also can often say, hey, I believe in these guys because we're improving day to day. When things start to go bad and somebody doesn't want to be there anymore, like that flips on its head. It's like, well, there's only one guy whose fault this one is, or like these guys did not play like they needed to in the second half. I'm appalled by our second half play because blah, 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 right? And you could be specific, you could be not specific. He wants to be fired. It's just like absolutely clear. The signal says, you're going to have to get rid of me because everybody in the fandom is listening to this and they want me gone too. So like, give me my walking papers, pay me my money, let me go sit on the sidelines and on the beach for a while. And then I'll be back to whatever the best job is. Whenever that period lapses, I can take a new one.
But whenever somebody does that though, to me, it just makes me think I would never want to hire this person again. Like I understand where they're coming from, but you always sound out of your depth if you do this. You always sound desperate if you do this. I think Lampard started doing this at Chelsea quite early on, and frankly, I just think it just seems kind of feeble. I know it's meant to be sort of a recontextualization. It's like, well, I gave them the right plan, but they screwed it up. But I don't think anyone buys that.
I think you can do that as a player. And they get confused, right? If you're a player and you're a captain in the dressing room, like you are supposed to go point out specific things. Like you are not keeping up your promise to this team, and you need to pick your shit up and you need to get better because like it's causing all of us to suffer, right? as a coach, you maybe can do that in a quiet way, like, 1-to-1, like, hey, we need to get better. Like, this is the plan to help you get better, but like, you still need to be supportive. If you do that out front in the same way that you do as a player, but you do it in front of the media, like, that's where everything falls down. Now, to give you a counterpoint though, if you're a very good coach, like, there are plenty of teams that still want to hire you. Like, how many times has Jose Mourinho done this nonsense in the press, and then like, bam, he's
Sure.
got another job? Like, it just happened forever. Conte is another one where, like, as things start to go downhill, you start to hear his commentary in the media. If you're a good coach, it's fine. I'm not sure Russell Martin is a great coach, and I'm the same way as you. And there are a bunch of smart organizations these days that look at that and like, you know what? You are not going to adjust to the organization. You are not going to adjust to whatever the resources that we have are. And therefore, like, if things aren't going your way, like, things will you'll just light the building on fire and then try and walk away. Like, that's not a good hire for us. It's not to say that other people won't want to do that, but the people that are switched on will hear this, and it'll have an impact.
Interesting. Because even with Mourinho, to me, it was like a back half of the career phenomenon, principally with Mourinho, when things started to go downhill. Because in the first half of his career, he would set fire to whatever he needed to in order to deflect attention away from
He would
bad
make up
performance.
absolutely anything.
Yeah, he'd start a fight with the manager. It was great, and I just thought I kind of like this. You know, he was incredible at doing it. The British press walked straight into it time and time again, and then some. I think it was kind of the latter stages of that second spell at Chelsea, or maybe it was just like the Real Madrid dressing room like permanently broke him in this regard. But suddenly it was just individuals being called out all the time, and
it's a weird one. I think you're right, and I think he was a genius at it. And he probably should have continued to do it, but here we are. So
yeah, well, Russell Martin, I don't think is a genius, or at least is not showing it right now, because Southampton, they gave up 0.4 XG on the opening day to Newcastle, but since then they've allowed 1.4 plus in every game. They've allowed over 2 XG in 5 games, which is poor for anybody who doesn't know stats out there. Just going to explain to you.
That's very relegation-y if we were to add an E to the end of a word.
They're actually only conceding the third most shots, though, in the Premier League. Leicester and Brentford are conceding more per 90, but they are not. I looked this up. They're 90th out of 96 teams in Europe's top 5 leagues for shots conceded per 90, which again, poor.
The Premier League is a tempo league now. Like, there are a lot of shots that happen. I think there are a decent amount of long range goals. Again, it feels like the long range goals are actually pushing back against the narrative. The media finally caught on to the fact that like teams are trying to shoot from closer, and we're just seeing like screamers all the time. Like City Vardiol's goal this weekend is just one of a series of ones. You're like, wow, it's a good long range goal. And the stats people are like, don't not take long range shots. There is a strategy around this for who should take long range shots. Sometimes they're useful as long as you've already optimized short range shots. But if you're taking long range shots at the expense of short range shots, then that's what you should not do, because there's a multiplicative number on this. Sometimes there's an exponential on this for how much more likely it is to be a goal if you move it 6 yards closer. So like, look for the other pass. So I think Russell Martin has to be fired. They should have fired him last time. I'm not out hunting for heads on this, but it was just very clear that what he was doing, and then his intransigence about style of play, and I only play one style. And like, dude, you're just, again, asking to be fired because your team is in the Premier League. Like, if you want to do that shit in the Championship when you've got one of the top 3 squads in the Championship, and be like, oh well, if we just keep playing this style, we'll be fine. That's probably okay. But if you're doing it in the Premier League, where Southampton have just been promoted, don't know if you noticed that, you're probably going to be outgunned. And you need to play in a style that is a little more pragmatic in order to potentially keep the franchise up, which was the goal in the first place. So, yep, he should go, and they need to hire somebody fast. But it's always interesting to see how long these things drag on.
And it's now an 8-point gap to Leicester. I mean, like
you're just mad about your prediction.
I think anyone who watched the show would tell that I'm not that wedded to that prediction. But honestly, it was annoying to see it immediately just like punted into the ground. 8 points, even a great manager is really going to struggle to bring that back. But Leicester, just before we move on from this, what do you think of Facundo Buonanotte on loan from Brighton? 1.2 expected goals and assists in this game combined, which is very funny. He's at 5 goal involvements for the season. He's 19. His defensive actions are also hilarious, like really, really high.
Yeah, so I think I flagged him up in the last roundup. I was like, well, what did we learn from this match? Like, he can hit the ball really hard with his left
Yeah.
foot. That was what we learned, like, a couple of ones ago. Like, there's a shocking amount of kid talent running around out there. Like 19 years here. Like Dibbling is like an 18-year-old. There's 20-year-olds over there. Like it's so exciting. And this is the result of money and also investing in the academies and also investing in structures that will let some of the younger kids come through, or being willing to loan them out in places that promise to play them at a really good level. Yeah, he looks like another one. Like Brighton, outside of Chelsea, perhaps Brighton might have the deepest full set squad. You look at all their loanees as well. You're like, you guys are really good, and they're just going to get a little bit better in the next couple of years. So, pretty exciting if you're a Brighton fan. I guess like Kieran Maguire. I'm not sure if it's exciting for anybody else out there. Yeah, Leicester fans should cherish him.
Brighton are just going to sell an attacker for 9 figures next summer and not get appreciably worse. That's kind of how it feels right now.
Or they'll sell like Matoma for 40 somewhere into Europe, and he'll be amazing somewhere else, and they'll just like restock with like a kid.
God, it's so annoying. They're so good. Okay. Should we move on to Fulham Villa? Quite a tough beat for Fulham.
Fulham matches are eventful. I think that a lot of things happen. Sometimes things happen and then they don't happen. Like there was a penalty that was saved. I feel like that's not the first time that's happened this year. Yeah. I don't even know what to think about that game. I don't feel we learned a lot on either side. We learned that own goals are bad.
Yeah, I would say they're bad.
I was pretty sure Rodgers' goal was an own goal. That definitely looked like it took like a big meaty deflection off somebody's butt and then went the other way. But it looked like it was going wide. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I always find that stuff hard to gauge, but to me, it always just feels like it kind of should be an own goal when it's so
far away,
like going in because it's somebody on the arse. It was interesting that you were saying the other day you thought Emery might be too conservative to get enough results away from home to push for top 4. Here, they got pretty lucky, I would say. I mean, that goal that Watkins scores, the header Watkins scores, is an insane finish. It's not a great chance that they worked. Then they get an own goal. It just feels, I don't know, it just feels like they kind of like lucked into this one.
They had 2 own goals, in my opinion. Like Rodgers had the first own goal, and then the second one was definitely an own goal. So yeah, 2 own goals in a corner. Not to say that they haven't been better at set pieces this year, because they have. Like you can tell they're clearly executing better in that phase. Yeah, I mean sometimes you take the points in your run, right? And actually Brighton did that this weekend. We'll talk about that in the wrap up. But the rub can go both ways. And sometimes John Duran scores from a million miles away. And sometimes you just end up with, meaty own goals that end up giving you a 3-1 scoreline against a team that's been pretty good, pretty punchy. I think they're different in terms of their punchiness than Forest are, though, because Forest are going to lock you down, and Forest are going to be a miserable grind, and like they might get the 1-0 out. Fulham feel like you can have a track meet with them and they might occasionally come out on top, and then other teams might come out on top. So quite a different flavor to 2 teams that feel like about the same strength, but entirely differently concocted in how they play.
Yeah. So Fulham, I think, will win a lot of neutrals over this season. I mean, 2.6 XG in this game while giving up 1.4. That's a lot of fun. But Ted, look, obviously, you've worked behind the scenes with football clubs. And so really what I wanted to ask you, benefit of your expertise here, what drugs is Raul Jimenez taking this season?
I never like to ask that question unless we need to know what drugs.
Is that rude?
No, I mean, maybe it is. I don't know. But like the only context I like to ask that question is like, do we need to continue making sure that they take the drugs that they took before they transferred here in order to get the same performance benefit? Because like, I'm not really judgy about that type of stuff. Like, football often has sort of like waved things through for performance enhancing stuff. You'll occasionally get like a stealth ban for reasons. Occasionally somebody does a lot of cocaine and then gets stealthily kicked off the team for a while, but no one can ever write about that because of reasons. And then they go on to coach, clubs elsewhere. Sorry.
Oh my God, Ted.
I'm
so close.
I'm creeping here. There's but no, I don't know. He had a fabulous goal in the internationals, I think against the United States as well.
Yeah.
The US finally had a 2-0 against themselves. He's been great. And this goal, like, it didn't even look like much. It wasn't like fancy. He ran through the whole defense. He just like kind of nudged a guy a little bit, like used his strength and balance, and then just right in the corner on a lovely solo break against two center backs, I think, were there with him.
Mm-hmm. And this look, he's 33 years old. He's been, I want to be kind, but he's been crap for quite some time now. But he's 7th in the Premier League for non-penalty expected goals so far. I think he was at 4 shots, 1.7 expected goals in this match. He's at 1.2 per 90. This guy's, I don't know what's going on, but I can't imagine it will last, but it's extremely fun while it's going on.
There is an old striker resurgence at the moment, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
That boy.
Tall boys.
Those two. Yeah. Like, so one of the benefits that you're seeing, and this is an ebb and flow, but I think the Premier League's gotten so big that the pressing has pushed teams to go a little more route one.
Sure.
You need a bigger striker in order to go route one, especially against like all the beasts that are in back lines now. But if you have a dynamic sort of forward that has a bit of size on them, like they will still create problems, especially if they got some pace against these back lines as they get tired. And teams are getting stretched. Like the whole thing is getting stretched. So they're getting opportunities that they might not have had as much before. There's also just more creative players in and around the attacks. Like Fulham in particular have a lot of creative passers, mostly out of the Arsenal Academy at one point or another. And a striker will benefit that.
Yeah, they've got now a really exciting kind of cast of attackers, and having Jimenez as a guy for them all to work around, I guess, does make a lot of sense, especially when he's pulling off stuff like that assist against United City the other day, rather.
I mean, when you look at his history, you're like, yeah, Journeyman has like one of the best assists over the last few years, like ones that you will actually remember and tell children about in the future. Like, didn't know he had it in him, but really nice to see. Thanks, appreciate that.
Okay, right. So we're approaching the end now, but before we wrap up, it'd be nice to look at Newcastle Brighton, because Newcastle lost this game, obviously, at home to Brighton. They're on 0 goal difference after 8 games. Not tremendous. But looking at this match, I kind of thought there are some signs of life here. They played a real team and they outshot them 21-10. They had 60% of the ball. On XG, it was a bit more even, but they were unlucky to lose this match.
I think that they were listening to the pod last week, and they were offended. Like nobody believes in us, but particularly Patrick and Ted don't believe in us. Mm-hmm. And what happened was, I think actually Brighton may have adjusted to be a little more practical for this game, given that like you were suddenly facing a Tonali and Bruno and Ishak and Gordon. Like it's one of the rare times that Newcastle have had a stack of players that you would say that are definitely their first 11 that are in the squad. They attacked quite well. I think Brighton did not want to push the press, much like we talked about before. The Liverpool game and Chelsea game. They're like, ooh, this looks a little dangerous. We've had some problems in our own build up, so like let's be a little careful about this. And Newcastle benefited from it, and they had what I felt like was their first really good process game against a good team this season. So, about 50% of the time, like they'll win this, and they look like they deserved it. That's a really good sign for the future. So, I mean, it sucks that they lost 1-0. Welbeck had another great goal, also off a little baby through ball that he managed to hold off a defender on and score from. Sometimes, bad things happen, but good process games are usually good indicators that things will get better in the future. Newcastle had a bunch of bad process games and bad good outputs that looked like they were going to ratchet down. They've had the wrong rub of the green the last couple of games, and now you're looking at them and say, okay, if they can play like this regularly, they may be the 7th best team right in there and abouts. We'll find out, but if you're a Newcastle fan, you've got to take heart in that. The other team that we kind of have to mention, and neither of us ever wants to, but Manchester United had a competent 90 minutes across the whole game.
Yeah, they did. It's okay. It's good. It's good to get a win against Brentford. They were comprehensively the better team. I think they limited Brentford to 8 shots, and they had over 20 themselves. This is good stuff. on the other hand,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of thought, why have Brentford let them do this? That was really my sense going into it. I mean, maybe Thomas Frank saw his name linked to the Man United job and thought, I'll just slide them a quick 3-point bribe here.
I felt like Steve Bruce used to do that every single time. He's like, yeah, McLaren as well. It's like, no, Alex, it's okay. Like, we're going to set ourselves up so that we're a little soft and squishy. You guys will eventually take the points. It was never competitive against the sort of like Ferguson Man United lineage. Maybe they were bad too. I don't know. But like, you're always creating these conspiracy theories in your head. We're not anti-Man United for the most part. I'm not. Like, I'm whoever the money is potentially on. Brentford lost by 1 here, but I did think the choice there from Frank was wrong. I think that he set up and paid them too much respect, just like Emery did last time. Like, this isn't the Man United that were super dangerous before. Like, this is a Man United that if you go after them, you can get results. Man City this year feels a little bit like if you go after them, you can get results. This is what having a league of even the top teams are a little bit flawed. And then like the Giants like have a variety of flaws inside of them. It encourages teams to be a little buccaneering, especially if they can think they can still defend while doing it. So Brentford bunkered in. They decided that they were going to try and keep things close and they lost 2-1. But again, credit where it's due. We weren't entirely sure that Man United could pull this performance off. And I think that what I saw in this game in particular that I wasn't expecting is I think Garnacho's starting to be a real problem. Like he's a kid. His shot locations are bad. He loves a wide angle shot. And against Premier League goalkeepers, wide angle shots are usually poor shots because they've got so much of it covered. But he hits the ball real hard. Like if he gets a little bit further inside on those, like those are goals on a regular basis because the reaction times aren't there. He opens up a little bit more of the goal and he is capable of putting them in corners. Everything else he does, this year he's a little less dribbly and carry, but he's got that and he's been that before too. And he's so young. Like that's another sign of life. And so we talked about like the youth resurgence across the league. Like, it's the big teams, it's the little teams, it's some of the teams that have other teams players on loan. But I cannot remember a time where we had so many young kids that looked like they were not even out of place and maybe slightly better than league average in the best league in the world.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I mean, it helps in this game when Rashford just plays the most insane pass you'll ever see.
What a pass. They always close down the guy, right? Because they have this ability to do this. Rash has done this a couple times in recent weeks where he also had the one from the far corner that just like seeing eyeballs in off the far post on the other side. Yeah, don't let the super skilled players have time ever on the ball because they'll pick you apart.
It's interesting though what you were saying about paying a team too much respect, because over the last kind of 20 years in English football, people have often used the word pragmatic as kind of a synonym for defensive. And they ignore the fact that often the pragmatic decision is not to be defensive. It's to go out really aggressive, go toe-to-toe with the team, even to turn a game into a trap meet if you think that gives you a better chance of winning, if the variance might help you out there. Is this broadly a problem that you think, that people kind of like tend towards playing defensively because they think that's a safe option? Rather than employing kind of some other strategy that would actually be safer for them?
I think it circles back around to the whole Russell Martin thing where he doesn't want to like deviate from his style. And this is the style of play that I'm going to play. Like, the right strategy is the one that gets you points. And sometimes those points are there because you can be aggressive track meaty type football and you can play on the break. And how many times did we watch Sir Alex sort of bunker in a middle block against Arsenal, let Arsenal eat the ball for like 60 minutes, right? And like they look like they're the most dominant team in the world. And then in the last 30 minutes, there's 2 goals from Ji-sung Park and freaking Wayne Rooney running down the other way, occasionally Berbatov. And you're like, oh, they've won 2-1. Again, great. That's exactly. But we were so good. We deserved the game. We were so good, right? The reality is the best head coaches and managers have some tactical flexibility, and they need to, because your best path to win and get points changes on a week-by-week basis. Sometimes it changes on what personnel you have available. Sometimes it changes on what surface is, right? Like sometimes you can't kick the ball that far. It's just getting stuck. It doesn't happen these days very often, but it used to. And so you need to play a bit more aerial. And so Marwan Fellaini chucking it down the pitch to like some guys that are running off of him becomes a useful strategy. being flexible and having the ability to have players that can employ flexibility without having, huge weaknesses, like that's the gift. And that gives forever for the most part.
Perfect. Well, I think that brings us to a close for this week's episode. Thank you very much for listening or watching. Make sure that you like and subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube, and make sure that you leave us a 5-star review if you're listening to us on your favorite podcast app. Also, follow us on Twitter. The Transfer Flow is also the best place to get the best football writing right now. So subscribe to the newsletter too. And if you'd like, check out Variance Betting, Ted's way to make you money on the side.
No, don't say that. That's not it. Like, we do gambling analysis and I include my own bets. It is not anything like ways to make money on the side, Patrick.
Look, just
horrible.
Sell a car, remortgage your house. Don't do those things.
This is not financial advice.
It's not good financial advice. Okay, thank you very much for listening. We will catch you next time. Bye-bye.